are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
I've seen you around for a few years, right?
Right.
You know, you've got an interesting look.
Oh, well, thank you.
Do you get told you look like certain people sometimes?
All the time, yes.
Like who would be one of those?
Who would... I get, well, John Taylor. I've got
John Taylor
from Brandon. I've heard that.
Yeah.
I've heard.
Yeah. Are you a musician?
No, I used to be, but,
Yeah.
but no longer now.
No longer?
Yeah.
Yeah. Were you a guitar player or?
No, I played violin. I
Oh.
studied classical violin.
Interesting.
Yeah, I went to the New England.
So what do you
Conservatory.
do out here?
Now I'm doing visual art, and yeah, yeah, that's pretty much.
How would you describe this visual art?
Well, it is narrative, figurative. I certainly think abstractly, and I can do abstract art, but
How do you display it?
well, it's two-dimensional, so
Okay.
yeah, I don't really. Yeah.
Okay, so it's two-dimensional painting or drawing or mixed media? Or?
You mix media.
Yeah, got
because
it.
I'm trained as a painter and a printmaker.
Very
So
cool.
lithography, etching, woodcut, you know, and I'm interested in the idea of, you know, certainly imagery that we all take with our phones and send it to each other. So, you know, this idea that we don't actually have something we can hang on the wall. Everything's very dislodged. I can send a picture to you, and you can send it to somebody else. So, yeah, so the idea of having a tactile or visceral quality, I think that's we're moving away from that, and it's more important now than before.
Do you think that that's a technology and the use of creating art through technology is?
You know, in terms of art history, there's certainly modernism, and then we're in sort of post-modernism, but I still think we're in modernism. In fact, working in Holland and working in France, I've been sort of included in a group, I guess, not saying that post-modernism, these things don't exist, but there's sort of a meta-modernist. We're in that kind of period, and certainly I think technology as well as paint and things like that, we're pushing the materials, in this case technology, photo, cell phones, that into as far as we can, and so it's evolving as we speak.
Right.
And I think, for example, there's a lot of things that are happening that I'm involved in that are sort of 5 years out that eventually will sort of, I think, get
really?
there. Yeah.
So we were talking earlier about how we both really love the off seasons here. you
Yes.
and I, and
Yes.
that we kind of a little dread about the influx of people that are going to be here this year based on what happened last year.
Yes, yes. I think that it's, you know, and I've heard a lot of discussion about the kind of things we were talking about, and I think that it's I think that the questions that are being asked and are the wrong types of questions. And
For instance,
how are we going to solve the problem of too many people here? It's a problem that cannot be solved. There's going to continue to be growth here. There's been growth here. It's the fastest growing county, which they mentioned this year, in all of Massachusetts, which is astounding to me. So the idea that this could even be a year-round place to begin with, they said it was 3.7% growth of all the counties. Essex, Middlesex, we're part of Massachusetts. I think we have to realize we are part of the state, and we are part of a larger community, which is the United States. And with that said, there's an influx also from Europe, Eastern Europe, all these places.
Sure.
And so the problem isn't going to be solved, but at best you want to minimize the impact on the infrastructure. Well, I would recommend sort of starting to think about how to minimize the impact of cars, and making things more accessible by bike, by moped, the way they do, for example, in a place like Rotterdam. In Holland is a good example, only because they have the same problem we had. And when people started getting hit by cars, getting killed, it really started with the children being killed. There was a lot of protests, and they redesigned, because as Americans, I think the world, they equate accessibility with biking, cars to Holland, but it was a conscious decision, which needs to happen here. And the same thing in Paris too. Narrow streets.
What would you do here?
For example, step one would be to remove some of the cobblestones and create a lane where either bikes or mopeds or both can move through town easily. Because now we have a problem where people are on the sidewalk,
You mean, would you even have a bike path going up Main Street?
I would have a bike path going right up Main Street. And
I can see it crossing Main Street because you got people coming from the boat going out towards, you know, Milestone.
Right. Well, I think that everyone should have equal access to everywhere on the island by any means sort of necessary.
I'm just not sure how you would do that going up Main Street. Down up the center?
Not up the center. I would have it
because
going.
You got parking on either side.
Right, but you could build in a lane and you would just move that parking. It's wide enough that you could move the parking a little bit to the left. So there's a clear path all the way up. So the parking
against the gutter, against the curb would be the biking?
The biking would be against the curb.
And then the cars would be in front of that.
Right, and then you could put a marker. I mean, they do this and again, not just in Holland, but Paris is a good example.
Might be enough room, I'm not sure, maybe.
Right, well, it's wide enough.
Or what if, yeah, right.
I mean, again, it's a civil engineering issue. It isn't just let's remove some abandoned cars.
You could make the sidewalk even narrower if you had to.
Yeah, you could make the sidewalk a little bit more narrow. You could create a wider path, and then you could still have the blueprint of Main Street. Yeah, you have to accept the fact that you're not going to stop it, and you have to do. For example, if we look at Boston, one of the best things they did, whether you agree with it or not, it was necessary, is the Big Dig. It put that city,
huge,
put Boston into the 21st century. So old city, old streets, you know, farmlands, all that, with, you know, Star Drive, these sort of in fact, I think it was in the 50s where they used to say 93 was the highway to nowhere, just ended at the city, and they hadn't solved that problem. Took a while, but now they've integrated everything. They've returned green space to the top of the city. They brought areas of the community together, which we could certainly do here with the right approach and planning, and I think with an acceptance attitude, because really the community, tourism, it drives that. So you need to accommodate that, as well as for year-round people, for everybody. And we have a finite amount of space, so we can't make the island bigger, so you need to economize, and you need to come up with a more thoughtful and deliberate approaches to the problem.
Well, John, nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too.
Very interesting guy. Thank you very much for your outlook.
Oh, thank you very much.